I call Jami-Lee Ross.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes one comes across an aged individual, and an aged individual who is still of sound mind is able to make lucid commentary, and somebody who can wow us with their knowledge and wisdom. Sadly, the speech from the Right Honourable Winston Peters was not one of those occasions. Mr. Speaker, I say to Brendan Horan, he shouldn't have yielded his 5 minutes to the Right Honourable Winston Peters because the House gained nothing from that 5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, today is Liberation Day. Today is Liberation Day for New Zealand workers who are members of unions that have not yet embraced the democratic principles of holding a secret ballot when strike action is being considered. And I say, Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that members of the opposition are not supporting this bill. They made a wise choice to support the bill at its first reading. In fact, I was going through the Hansard and saw a relatively cogent speech from the Honourable Trevor Mallard, one of the few of those types of speeches you hear from him. But, Mr. Speaker, they bottled it in the second reading speeches. They're bottling it today in the third reading speeches. And it's clear that rational thought processes were dropped by the wayside when they came to considering whether to support the bill at the second and third reading. Mr. Speaker, today is the day when members opposite need to decide which side of this issue do they support. Do they, on the one hand, stand by the very workers who will benefit from this bill, stand by and support workers' rights? Do they stand for giving workers the opportunity to vote on a question of going on strike free from intimidation, free from coercion, and free to make up their own mind? Or are members opposite instead going to be standing by their union masters by opposing an absolute and genuine pro-worker piece of legislation? And Mr. Speaker, we know what the Labour Party thinks about employment relations. We know what Andrew Little thinks about employment relations. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to the speech that we're probably going to get from Andrew Little. I'm looking forward to him telling the House what he thinks of employers. The fact that he said on Facebook that the only parasites out there are employers, that's what the Labour Party thinks of the very people that give New Zealanders jobs, that create the jobs for New Zealanders to work in. Mr. Speaker, they don't like hearing about what their own members are saying out there in the community. Their own members out there calling employers parasites. Well, I say that's appalling, Mr. Speaker. This is a pro-worker piece of legislation because it says to workers that we value them having the ability to determine their own destiny. We value Joe Smith worker being able to assess for himself, free from any outside influence, being able to assess his own personal situation and deciding for himself if going on strike is the right thing to do. Going on strike can't be easy. It can be financially and morally devastating. It's not a decision that should be taken lightly, and it isn't a decision that a worker should have to make without having the freedom to do so without someone standing over the top of them. It was a shame to read a number of the submissions that came before the Select Committee. The folk that try to say that they support the concept of having secret ballots, but then they say they don't support the bill, a bizarre situation that the Labour Party are finding themselves in as well. Mr. Speaker, I know why we're getting interjections from the other side. I know why they don't support this bill, because they're concerned that one day they might have to have a secret ballot for their leadership vote. They're concerned they might have to have a secret ballot for their leadership vote because the only way they're keeping David Shearer in there at the moment is using the bully boy union tactics that they're concerned this bill's going to stop. Mr. Speaker, the submitters that found themselves in a position where they were saying that they supported the secret strike concept but couldn't support the bill really should ask themselves this question. Is giving employers, giving workers the ability to decide for themselves without someone standing over the top of them. Is that a good thing or not? It absolutely is, and I say to the Labour Party that they should be supporting this piece of legislation today. Mr Speaker, we've learnt a few things this afternoon. We've learnt that the Labour Party doesn't support individual freedom. They don't support freedom of choice. The Green Party doesn't support freedom of choice either. And the New Zealand First Party doesn't support freedom of choice. If they did support freedom of choice, they'd be standing up in the House today and they'd be supporting this bill. Mr Speaker, if members want to stand in this House and say that they do support the concept of secret ballots, and that's what a number of the speeches have been saying, both in the first, second, and now we've heard it a few this afternoon as well. If they do support secret ballots, and if they do think it's a good idea, a good thing that a number of unions already have secret ballot provisions in their own rules, then they should go the step further and support this bill. Do the right thing by giving workers the freedom that they deserve. I want to address the comments that we've heard about an imbalance between employers and employees, because the people that have been making those comments clearly didn't read the first drafts of the Employment Relations Act. They didn't read the Employment Relations Act as it was passed by the last Labour government. Because if you want to talk about balances between employers and employees, you can see absolutely that the Employment Relations Act moved the balance so far in one direction that it's taken this government a number of years to move it back towards equilibrium to where it should be. Mr Speaker, I want to also touch on the Ports of Auckland for a moment, because I think it is important that we talk a little bit about what has become the key and well-known industrial dispute this year. Mr Speaker, it's fair to say that the Ports of Auckland dispute probably wouldn't have got as bad as it did if there was the opportunity for those Ports of Auckland workers to have a secret ballot for their strike. They don't like to hear it. They don't like to hear it. But the fact of the matter is, dozens and dozens of Ports of Auckland workers have left the union and gone back to work. A lot of those workers wanted to go back to work. A lot of those workers wanted to get back on the cranes. They wanted to get back on the straddle trucks. They wanted to get back and serve the Auckland community on Auckland's port. But they couldn't. They couldn't do so because there wasn't the opportunity to have a secret ballot on the question of whether they go on strike. They had people there intimidating them, coercing them into voting for strike action. They weren't able to make their own mind up, free from intimidation, free from coercion, and the fact of the...
Point of order.
Mr Speaker, I just seek your advice on that, because the matters the member is raising are actually currently before the Employment Court, and a matter of facilitation and also a court case.
Well, I've just cautioned members if that's the case. I'm not aware of that myself, but I just caution members, if that is the case, to be very careful in what they say. The second thing is that, while I'm on my feet, is that while interjections acceptable, this is a robust debate, and there's some strong feelings on both sides. I'd ask that instead of the shouting, that the interjections be reasonable so that I can actually not only hear the speaker but also hear the interjections as well. I call Jamie. Point of order, Denise Roach.
Mr Speaker, I'm just wondering if there's a standing order that caters for the circumstances whereas the person who is speaking is telling untruths.
No, you can't say... Order. This is an honourable House, and members are taken at their word. If the member has some conflict or doesn't agree with what the member is saying, that's a rebuttal point in a debate. These are matters of opinion and matters of debate. You cannot say that someone is lying. There's a standing order to that effect. You cannot say someone is telling lies or lying. These are debatable points, and the opportunity arises in debate And I know that the party has an opportunity shortly to respond by way of a 5-minute call. If the member is taking a call or a member from the party is taking a call, that's the chance then to rebut what is being said. But you cannot say that a person is lying or has told lies. I call Jami-Lee Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take it that the opposition from the Green Party just before was about my reference to them not supporting freedom of choice. And I absolutely stand by that comment. I absolutely stand by the comment that the Green Party doesn't support freedom of choice because they're not supporting this bill. They're not supporting workers having the option to make their own decision by way of secret ballot when it comes to deciding whether they go on strike or not. And, Mr. Speaker, if they do support freedom of choice, if they disagree with the comments that I've made here this afternoon, they should be voting yes for this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I want to just finally congratulate the Honourable Tau Henare. In fact, I probably should call him the Honourable Martin Luther Henare, given the number of comments and quotes he's made with regards to Martin Luther King here this afternoon. But he's done the right thing, Mr. Speaker, by putting this piece of legislation into the ballot, shepherding it through the parliamentary process and bringing it to a third reading here this afternoon, where we in this Parliament are able to help liberate workers and give them the freedom to make their own decision during strike actions. Mr. Speaker, he's done a good job, and this will go down as a piece of legislation that he can look back on and remember for doing something good for workers in New Zealand. And I look forward to it being read for a third time this afternoon.
I call Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by acknowledging